It's 6:30. I call this city council meeting to order. We do have a quorum present. At this time, we're going to ask Mr. Robert Fleming to please lead us in the pledge of allegiance. And after that, please remain standing for the police or the learner to bring the invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the Texas, one state, under God, one indivisible.
I do not see her.
Okay, well, in that case, I guess I'll just step right in there and take care of it. Before I bring the invocation, I would like for us to just take a moment to remember Officer Carter of the Johnson County Sheriff's Department. He passed away very suddenly. Robert knew him as a deputy as well. His family and everything, please be lifting them up in your prayers during this time. Heavenly Father, Lord, we just thank you for the days that you've given us, Lord. We thank you for all the blessings you've bestowed upon us in our city. Father, I thank you that as we look forward to the new year, that you'll continue to be with us, that you'll continue to guide this council to make the decisions that are best for our city and our community. Father, I just ask that you just please remind all of us the true reason for the season we're celebrating right now, your Son, Jesus Christ. We thank you and praise you in his mighty name. Amen. Amen. All right. Okay, first time will be update from the mayor and council members. Sorry for the interruption. We heard there were some nice boys and girls here. We have some gifts for you. What do you got?
Thank you very much. Thank you, always first.
I don't know.
Thank you.
You know, they could take a date and let us go.
How are you? I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Am I too good, sure?
Oh.
I hope the color of those boxes don't indicate what's inside.
Here.
What? Who all they for? For 7 of them.
It's only ordered 2 bills.
I don't know what.
I think I told them to get those for y'all.
I'm sorry. Just for the capsule.
Oh,
Oh, it's not on this side?
yes. There was enough opportunity.
No, they got them.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for letting me see you around. Good seeing you. Good seeing you. Merry Christmas. Any more surprises?
Perhaps.
No, we didn't. You notice he didn't speak up. Are we okay with that?
I think we're okay.
Okay, first item is update from the mayor and council members and update from city staff members. I don't know, I think pretty much everybody made it to our Christmas on Main Street that the chamber sponsored. It was a great event. There's a lot of people that came through there. Our animal shelter actually adopted out 5 to 6 animals that they brought.
it was a good time. And, I want to thank Mary and the chamber for all that they did to get that put on. I talked to a couple of businesses down there and they are excited for next year's.
Yes.
So they're already making plans on what they're going to do here for next year. Anybody else have anything they'd like to talk about?
I was very impressed. It was very nice to see the city come together. Cool.
Tree looks beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Really good.
Yeah.
Good job.
Thank you.
Allison Hanford put in.
The staff was phenomenal. Y'all did an excellent job.
Thank you.
You need kudos.
Yes.
And tomorrow night has been guaranteed to be better than last year. So,
Oh, no.
I don't think you can.
oh, I don't know.
There's not many videos.
Maybe.
They've got some plans. It's going to be interesting. All right, we'll now move into our public forum and with presentations and recognitions. Anybody sign up for the public forum?
No, sir.
All right. We'll just move right ahead on into the work session then. Item number one, review and discuss questions related to the budget report, financial statement for the year 2022. Mr. Peacock.
Mr. Mayor, let me first clear up the first thing that I saw when I started looking at the numbers. There is a non-departmental significant payment that was not budgeted that put us 570.9% out of budget. That was the TIF payment to the water district for the first portion of the water main project down Main Street. So that'll be moved and cleared out in here, but right now that's where we put it and held it, and so that's why that's so high. Other things are the revenues increased largely because the tax note that was funded. Our fund balance and along with that tax note has increased some interest payments that were a little more than projected. And there's also been some additional revenues from the ESD through grants and incentives that are up almost 24%. Revenues, that was probably the biggest one. There's obviously some front loaded items that typically appear the first part of the year, maintenance contracts, agreements, payments on vehicles, and some of the notes, all that are usually done in the first quarter of our fiscal year. So that's why although we're at 16% into the budget, some of those numbers are a little high, the expenditures, and that's because of those front loaded contracts that we see annually. The same way with capital outlay and public works, some of that equipment that was in the has been purchased was budgeted this year, as are some working on getting some equipment in that you'll see an agreement here tonight that funds part of the CIP funding for public works equipments that'll be ordered here in the next, as soon as we get all the financing squared away. Those are the big things that jumped out. If you have any questions or if anything particularly sticks out at you, I'd be happy to try to answer those for you.
Anybody have any questions? I did notice the supplies and the community services explained. That was the purchase of the new decorations for downtown.
Correct.
And all that. The new fire truck that we have on the order, we've not had to put in money up front on that, or
It's paid for.
it's already paid for. It's our last year budget paid for.
Well, we made the first, we financed it, got all that stuff done last year and prepaid it because they gave us a pretty decent discount. Unfortunately, their materials have been in short supply. The chief's been in contact with them. I believe that it's scheduled to go into production. Is it April or May, Chief?
Somewhere in there, and we're supposed to get delivery.
They're about a year behind, but so is everyone else. So it's, we looked at what options we had when we first were made aware of it. There's just not any. So it's not uncommon. So we're hoping to have it by the end of this year.
Other questions on the budget? Okay, we'll move on to item number 2, discuss receive an update regarding the Joshua Area Chamber of Mines Fair Grant.
Okay, well, I have been appointed president since approximately the end of March, and since then, I think we've done a really good job of cleaning things out and laying a really solid foundation and continuing to nurture and build relationships with business owners. We launched a new website platform in approximately the end of July, about July, and since then we've obtained 25 to 28 new or renewed members just in the last 5 or 6 months with that new platform. Total membership is between 180 and 190 because we have a new platform. We still have to manually kind of double check a couple of things. That's across all membership levels. We've got members and businesses signing up for this beyond a small business membership and signing up for larger memberships as well to get those benefits of greater exposure and greater marketing. We've partnered with the city on 3 major events this year. We did the Movies in the Park. We partnered with JISD and the city for the Back to School Bash at the YMCA, and then last weekend with Christmas on Main. The vision for me for the Chamber in 2023 is to partner across possibly 5 different events and double up on Movies in the Park, come back to 4th of July because the community is asking for that. There's a great expectation of having something on 4th of July or having a parade at Christmas. And so being able to pull some community events together in partnership with the city and possibly economic development as well would be what's on our radar for 2023. We have a continued partnership with the YMCA. They let us set up our Joshua community markets there. We did 5 of those over the course of this year. And hands down, all the vendors really want to do more community events like Christmas on Main. That was much more cost effective and beneficial for them at this time of the year, which was the whole reason behind Christmas on Main. Our vendors are used to having a Christmas marketplace. And when we were a bit scared that there wasn't going to be a Christmas event, then we had to pull something together because those vendors depend on that income at this time of the year. So we needed to do that for our small businesses. Let me see. For transparency purposes, any debt that the chamber had to the IRS was paid in full in one lump sum. That was taken care of back in the end of September, beginning of October as well. So everything is free and clear. There we have also retained, put on retainer a bookkeeper who is not the previous bookkeeper, and she starts in January, and so we will be able to pay monthly and quarterly payroll. And payroll tax, personal taxes as well. So that's already done and dusted, and we've got a new kind of system in process to be able to go into 2023 a little bit better with that. We worked really closely this year with Molly Martin with economic development, and that has led to introduction of a lot of business people in the area that are very excited to partner with the chamber and looking forward to kind of the fresh, renovated feel and look of the chamber. So that's led to potential board members and ambassadors, and we can see where we can partner and collaborate on endeavors and events as well. Let me see. What else? Our goals for 2023 are going to be obviously improved and continued collaboration with the city of Joshua and our economic development board. We also want to increase the capacity of the board of directors in our ambassador program. We are not at full capacity with that, but these introductions and these relationships that we've cultivated over the last few months have led us to some really strong leads and people that are very genuinely interested in contributing to the chamber in that capacity, serving as a board member or an ambassador for the chamber. So that's exciting. Our goal is increased retention, greater member recognition, highlights, and more consistent communication in terms to the community in terms of newsletters, social media, and so forth. In order to do that, we are looking at recruiting a free unpaid intern from our Hill College community or Alan Keene, our Sunday Advanced University. I'm hoping that we can collaborate with them and work out some kind of partnership, maybe one semester at a time, to get some free interns in to help us with the marketing component of what we need to do. Continued marketing for the chamber as well, and to grow our community events. I think that we are showing the community that our vision is to provide business members an opportunity to give back to the community, but for the community to recognize that these events are made possible by their local businesses. So our goal is to increase the number of events that we do community-wide in partnership with the city, of course, so that we can open that line of recognition on both sides. Member education is gonna be a big goal for 2023 and holding at least, twice a year meetings, educating businesses about their benefits and how to best utilize and take advantage of the chamber and what we have to offer, take advantage of me and my time and to help with the marketing and that outreach, but also what, they can do for themselves across our social media platforms, creating a more, in-tuned member events calendar and so forth. Yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of work to do, but we've laid a really solid foundation the last 9 months. We're really proud of that growth and what we've been able to bring to the businesses and to the community. But I'm happy to answer any questions if you have.
Do I have any questions?
Any questions, but I do appreciate all the effort that you put in, and it shows that you enjoy what you're doing and that you value what the chamber can bring to the community, and we appreciate your effort.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Molly said she would.
We have to reschedule.
Have you restarted the ambassadors program?
Tentatively, we've got several local business leaders and community members that have been very active in asking me about their participation with coming into the holidays. I've just put it on hold until January so we can have a good workshop because new relationships have been built along the lines as well. And so I didn't want to do anything with one or two people. I wanted to just bring everybody together at one time and start fresh. So that will pick up again in January.
And I do remember one time you did tell us that you were not being paid. Has that been rectified?
I will get paid. I have not allowed, I have refrained from doing that until we had the bookkeeper on payroll to pay me. We did not want to get into that situation, so we have minutes approving pay and some back pay, so that will get taken care of. But I'm doing that completely at will, knowing that we need to take the right steps to avoid any financial turmoil down the way.
I know every event that I've attended that the chamber has done, it has been done well.
Thank you.
Participation has been phenomenal. Like I said, the Christmas on Main Street, I was there from 2 o'clock till 6 o'clock. And it was a constant, steady flow of people coming through there. Our citizens want these types of things.
They do.
And I think the partnership between the city and the chamber and our businesses is going to help us grow our city and bring it back together where it's supposed to be.
I agree. And with that said, I have to say thank you to Alice and thank you to Molly and to all the city parks and staff and all the guys and the police and the chief and everybody that was out there. They just made it so easy and seamless, and they jumped right on board and they're willing to do it, and they had a good time and they're hanging out, and it was just, you couldn't ask for a better collaboration and a stress-free environment. So thank you for allowing me to do that.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the next item, the consent agenda. We'll discuss, consider, and take possible action on meeting minutes for the November 17th, 2022 meeting. Anybody have any questions or comments about the minutes? No? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from the last week.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Kidd to approve the minutes from last month's meeting and a second by Angela. Any discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Okay, next item, we'll move to our regular agenda. It's 6:49 and we'll open a public hearing to discuss the 2023-2024 Texas Community Development Block Grant Program applications to the Texas Department of Agriculture.
This is just part of checking the boxes on the grant application process. We do receive additional credits for posting a public hearing within this time frame for the end of the year. We are applying for the community block development grant to hopefully get approved for some street improvements. We have a Cobb Street in mind. There are criteria that has to be met based on specifically for roads, so cost.
Anything else that we need to discuss on that? Then I'll close the public hearing at 6:50. Okay, item number 2, discuss consider possible action on an ordinance repealing existing section 12.04.022 penalty and section 12.04.033 use required exceptions on article 12.04 truck routes of chapter 12 traffic and vehicles and code of ordinances. Replaced with a new section 12.04.002 truck routes and a new section 12.04.03 unlawful acts exceptions. Ms. Francis.
That was maybe, but it was that on it. It was communicated. This is just, I initially brought this to you probably 2 months ago. We have made some adjustments to it. Terry made some suggestions on as far as making it enforceable. So this is just a revised ordinance that Terry's gone through. Did you have anything?
No, we defined the truck routes and the extent of roads where there were it's unlawful to operate a commercial vehicle. And then just put in included definitions and penalties for violation. So, and then there are exceptions to it for, emergency vehicles, someone going to and from their residence, et cetera. So it's a pretty standard truck route ordinance for cities. And so we, after a couple months ago, when we discussed it, just went back and added some language to it to make it a little more clear.
None of the roads or anything has been adjusted. It was just a few changes in the verbiage and the
It's just a little bit of verbiage.
So this sentence one between if the text dot ever builds the 917 project, will we have to readdress this, or will it still be?
I think
Is it? Well, yeah, that is a truck route. All designated farm marker roads within the corporate limits of the city, including but not limited to FM 917 already included as a truck route.
And two, I think once the highway does come in, it will actually solve the problem even more. So, yeah. This is just to kind of get us through. Kristen's noticed a pretty significant problem with the truck traffic, so he's trying to do his part and keep the roads maintained as well as possible. So.
Any other questions?
One question. Country Club Drive. Is that kind of goes a long way around? Not bad, right? It goes right, well, yeah. Well, what about trucks that can get up to Burnison's property on top of you?
As long as they have a reason to be there, I think the point is to make sure that they have a reason to be there and they're not just using it for a cut through. Like, so if there's a development, then
I think what you're talking about though is gonna take Clubhouse, not Country
Right.
Club. Clubhouse is not
Okay,
on
look
there.
out. Yeah, that's what. Okay, can't correct.
Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion that we amend the code of ordinances as amended.
So,
Okay, we have a motion by Shelley to amend the code of ordinances as noted and seconded by Merle. Any discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Okay, item number 3, discuss, consider possible action on an ordinance repealing existing article 13.02 solid waste of chapter 13 utilities of the code of ordinances and replace it with the new article A 13.02 solid waste. Ms. Francis.
if this item and then also the following item are in reference to the changes to the billing that we're making for the trash. In order to do so, we need to update the ordinance. The current ordinance as it stands actually references a contract from 2009 or 10. So we rewrote the ordinance in such a way to remove it. So when we do renew our contract each year, we don't have to go in, or not each year, every couple of years and redo the ordinance. So we did that, but we also kind of cleaned up the ordinance and took out a lot of the other stuff in it that isn't necessary that can reference the contract on file in the city secretary's office. So
Questions or discussion?
How often do we put that out for bid?
or
We put it out,
the 5-year contract.
2 or 3 years ago, we put it out. I think we got 4 or 5 bids, I think. But the rate, we actually were able to shave some off of the rate. So they gave us the best rate, best option. So we just stayed with them.
But it's a
With
5-year contract, so.
it's
Yeah.
5 year and has an automatic renewal. If I think if you choose it, that stayed in, and or you can opt to bid it again. So it hadn't been bid in 10 or 12 years since then. So and typically we don't let them go that.
Any other questions or discussion? I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion, we approve the ordinance. Release collection.
Okay, I have a motion by Angela to approve the change to the ordinance for the solid waste, and seconded by Johnny. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Okay, item number 4, discuss consider possible action on ordinance repealing. That's one we just did. Discuss consider possible action on amendment to solid waste contract regarding billing.
Okay.
So we just have to change.
Yes, the only thing that's changing in the contract, the term is staying the same. There's one little paragraph in there that was adjusted for the waste connection. So we agreed to amend it and carry out the contract. That's the original.
And the rates and everything remain the same.
Yep.
No changes.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions or discussion? Entertain motion?
Make a motion, we approve the amendment to the waste connection billing.
Okay, I have a motion by Mike to amend the solid waste contract regarding the billing, and seconded by Shelley. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Okay, item number 5, discuss consider possible action approving a site plan regarding 0.278 acres land known as lots 5, 6, and 7, part of 8, lot 10, Cattle Peak Edition. WW Buyer Survey, abstract number 29, County of Johnson, Texas, locally known as 205 North Main, to allow for the commercial use of a business office. Mr. Maldonado.
Yes, sir. Mayor and council, the subject property is within the Heritage Overlay District. And is a plan of record with the Office of the Johnson County Clerk. Site plan approval shall be required for a change of use from residential vacant to non-residential or mixed use in the existing structure. Developments within the HP Overlay District shall be subject to design review as part of the site plan review process. Unless specifically noted within the section or requirements of this ordinance apply to the HP Overlay District. Design review is required in the district to ensure that development within the district is in conformance with design guidelines for the HP and the proposed developments are potentially compatible within the historic character of HP. Applications shall go before the Historic Preservation Committee before being scheduled for the Planning and Zoning Commission. The Historic Preservation Committee shall recommend to the Planning and Zoning Commission any application of designation sites, buildings, structures, objects, or areas as landmarks to be included in the Heritage Preservation Overlay District. Planning and Zoning Commission will then make its recommendation to the City Council. Site plan approval shall be required for the following. I highlighted the section of letter B, a change of use from residential vacant to a non-residential or mixed use in an existing structure. The HP committee has made their recommendation for approval on the November 28th meeting. And the Planning and Zoning Commission have made their recommendation for approval on the December 5th meeting.
Does anybody have any questions?
Make the motion. Change of zone from residential to mixed.
So I have a motion by Angela to change the zoning from residential to mixed use, seconded by Shelley.
It's a site plan.
It's a site plan. All right. So I have motion by Angela to approve the site plan. Still second.
Yes.
Seconded by Shelley. Any discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Okay. Item number 6, discuss, consider, and possible action on the proposed Freeze and Nichols agreement for engineering services. Mr. Peacock.
No, just a minute, Mayor. Is the site plan in? Never mind. Well, professional service agreement. Freeze Nichols is currently the engineering firm the city's used for the past several years. We rebid this last year with a couple of, I think we got 3 or 4 bids in, or not bids, but RFQs. We looked at those, didn't feel like that there was anything significant that would change, given the amount of development and ongoing things. We didn't think it would be a good time to make a change at this point. So we extended the agreement, you might recall, a few months ago to get us through the rest of this calendar year. So this would be a new agreement. Current terms would remain the same, fees would remain, and this would be a new contract for 3 years with an option for a rollover at the end of that, or an extension.
Any questions? Discussion? Entertain motion?
I moved to approve the Freeze and Nichols agreement for engineering services.
I have a motion by Johnny to approve the Freeze and Nichols agreement for engineering services, seconded by Merle. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Item number 7, discuss, consider possible action on approval of the contract between Government Capital Corporation and the City of Joshua for public works equipment. Mr. Peacock.
The funding agreement through government capital would be used for this type of equipment for equipment that was approved in the CIP plan. And payment was included in this year's budget. Just trying to get to where the interest rate is there. This is going to be for a replacement Kubota tractor, a jacketed kettle, a propane burner that would be used for asphalt work, laying out tar and asphalt, 60-inch rotary mower, and the traffic signal system that will allow us to, when we're working on the road setup, a traffic signal on each end of the construction, so we don't have flaggers. We actually have traffic signal, or we can set up, keep us from having to use flaggers. Being a small staff over there, that's always a big deal. Traffic, so this would be to eliminate that. All these items were requested in the CIP. Improved total cost is $283,913. 5-year payout scale is 4 pages behind that list. Happy to take questions. Yes, sir.
So the rotary motor is tracked.
It is.
Curious.
You can't play with it. You cannot play with it.
No, I'm curious as to.
It's designed to mow slopes. It's very wide bodied, almost like a tank. It's not quite that big,
Right.
But it's made to do detention ponds, creek, sidewalk. I mean, it'll mow flat,
Well, that's
but
my
it's made for kind of
What site
rough terrain.
specifically was it that we
we would use it on detention ponds on the side of some of the roads with slopes that are not where we can mow or get up where we can mow, heavily brushed areas. This thing's a monster. And
Currently,
so
right now, they're weeding, they're getting like a row of guys and having the hand weeding all of these, so.
it's I was very skeptical of it initially until I saw it. And
Didn't they bring it out?
I just wasn't
Yeah,
aware
they-
that we were blowing, it was that steep, so that's why I was asking.
it's mainly the detention ponds and along a lot of the areas where we've got drainage channels and we're having to go in and hand do it just because it's so rough and this thing it'll make an impact. All right.
Didn't they bring it out for them?
They did bring it out. I was not a willing participant in this until I actually saw it. I was afraid it was more of a toy, but this is a legit mowing.
The arm was taking it.
It's not an arm. It's a tracked lawnmower.
Just, remote control.
It's driven by remote control. I mean, you have to stand there close to it, but it'll mow all around detention ponds. It'll go down and pull into creek beds, back out of them. It's very impressive.
Didn't at one time we decided, or we discussed and articulated on the track?
We have one.
Siding work.
Yeah, we bought it last year.
Okay,
We have it.
so we don't use that around the pond and everything?
We do, but we can't get into them. We can't get up close enough with it. It's too big to make those. It won't do those slopes.
Want to do the wet ground better too?
Yeah. This thing will do the wet ground too. It's a pretty serious rig.
Any other questions?
And Mayor and Council, we could also, if we authorize approval of the contract, is authorize the mayor to execute the resolution. The resolution says we approve the contract. This is page 104 of the agenda. We need that in the motion to clarify it.
So I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion, that we approve the capital improvement public works with the resolution.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, so I've got a motion by Mr. Kidd to approve the contract between Governmental Capital Corporation and the City of Joshua for Public Works Equipment and the allowing the mayor to execute the resolution. Seconded by Johnny. Any discussion? All those in favor? 6-1. Or all opposed? Sorry, you're opposed? Okay. 6-1. Okay. Item number 8, discuss consider possible action of funding repairs on the early outdoor warning system. That's the chief.
Let me start with, you may recall, last year we had a couple of sirens that failed, during a weather event. So the chief made some initial arrangements to get things back up and running. I tasked him with a complete review of the early warning system that we had. What, if any, changes needed to be made, updates, upgrades. So that has now been completed. And so he can certainly answer whatever questions you may have. But what the recommendations are is that a new siren be needed off of 174. One of the sirens needs to be relocated to extend the coverage on the north side of the city. The upgrade in the alert software that is in the EOC that activates these sirens. And there is a control box that needs to be updated where the electronics are no longer serviceable. The total cost of the project for all of those is $76,992. We have a couple of options for funding. Those funds could be used We could use the American Rescue Plan funds for those. That current balance is $521,000. Or you could choose if you preferred just to use general fund reserves, which currently sit at $6.6 million. So the option is yours. They are needed. I think adjustments and repairs, this will protect us for. One of the things I also asked you to look at was growth, future growth, and I think we've done, he's done a pretty thorough review, and I think this will take care of our early warning needs for many years. And Chief, you have anything you want to add?
What you said as well as the software upgrades, the activation software will allow us to activate sirens like one happens within like 2 weeks. So we're at really dispatch right now. We're getting iron this one, we're going to be right from steel. Intersection, Main Street 74. There's a very big redundancy right there. The iron says, he said, not a pretty good size. Yeah. South side that wasn't covered by anything, so that was the end of that.
Anybody have any questions? The one question I have, I know we've got a lot of growth going out to the west end. And all that, is that adequately covered by the sirens?
We're pretty covered, well covered.
There's one on that.
I have any questions?
Are you looking for us to make a decision tonight on the funding source, or is that something that?
I don't need you to make a decision on funding source tonight. I gave you the option. That decision can be deferred until we do mid-year adjustments, which will be done in March. This is just to get approval to get it started. Some of this stuff is going to take some time to get in the works. Getting poles moved and relocated and some of that stuff. So, but we will be able to clean up the funding mid-year.
I have a question about the American Rescue Plan Act money. I believe the last time you talked about it, it's like you use it or lose it type of thing, right?
Correct.
There is an expiration date on what's left.
There is. The first round of funding would expire in 2024 and the second round 2025.
Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll second.
Okay, so I've got a motion to approve the funding repairs for the early outdoor warning system by Angela, seconded by Mike. Is there any discussion on this? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Okay, item number 9, discuss, consider, and possible action on the recommendation of the Charter Review Commission. Who's gonna jump into that? Here,
I'll be glad to. You jumped into the Charter Review Commission. Do you all have a copy of the materials that the latest version of the recommendations of the Charter Review Commission? If not, I have them here for you. Okay. Yeah, I will. Sure.
Yeah.
It's gonna be the
No, I haven't seen it already. But also, I think that's not even fit in with and stuff. We should probably. See if we can come.
Everybody on board?
I think. Yes. Are you gonna remodel, rebuild the front of it? Yeah. Resize. Okay, good addition.
Most of the, I believe we can characterize the proposed revisions from the Charter Review Commission as being cleanup or clarifications. There weren't significant changes. The charter was adopted in, I believe it was in the late nineties. And we had, to the best of my knowledge, we had one other, the only time I was involved with it was in 2012, I believe we did some amendments, and it hasn't been touched in about a decade. The first part of section 3.06 talks about vacancies and forfeiture of office. This is in the provisions of the charter related to city council. And we wanted to clarify one of the provisions currently says if you fail to attend 3 consecutive meetings of the council without the prior consent of the council, unless the absence is caused by illness or by illness of a family member. No, those terms aren't defined anywhere. And if there is an illness or council member's illness has an illness, there's virtually no way to get prior consent of the council for that. So this is to address those situations where there wasn't, and again, the term family isn't defined. So is it your immediate family? Is it a great aunt? Whatever it may be. And so what most or what a lot of cities in North Texas have done is allow a council member to get excused for missing, so that we don't get into automatic, well, there's a vacancy now because you missed 3 meetings. And so this clarifies, and I think it makes it a little more reasonable about how the council handles that. In section 4.01 of the charter, we talked about, and this is probably the one we had the most discussion on, about terms and term limits. And there was an ambiguity about what the current provisions of the charter state. And I have to admit, I did not draft those. That was back in 1998, and there are some provisions that seemed a little bit inconsistent to me. And so this clarifies what is a term or what counts as a term of office. So in at the top of page 2, if you see this issue about, well, how much of a term do you have to serve before it counts as a term? So basically, it's about you serve more than 50% of the term to count for a term. So, for example, if a subsequent provision is adopted, if someone resigns from the council, they're up in May, up for election or re-election in May, they resign in December, and we appoint someone for about 6 months. Does that count? They served a full term? And this clarifies, no, that wouldn't count as being a full term of office. And then an added provision, if you look at number 4, that's highlighted, that's bold in bold. This was discussed at the last Charter Review Commission. And so if someone has served 4 consecutive terms, then they won't be eligible to run or to be appointed to a position on the council until the next general election after their term ends. So this gives maybe not a year, but perhaps close to a year off council before someone could run again or be appointed to fill a vacancy on the council. And the reason we added this is that right now we have our elections in May. There was a while ago, I believe it was about 2012, the legislature allowed cities to go to 4-year terms if they wanted to. And they also allowed you could by ordinance just change your election date from May to November if you wish. So we've had a couple of cities in the past that opted for that November provision, and there was a time frame in which you had to do it. If you didn't do it, you lost the ability to go to a November election. And then when we have a May election, there can be a runoff. So we didn't want to say there has to be a year between you leave office, because if there's a runoff, you would, the election would be sometime in June, mid to late June, and if someone wouldn't take office till perhaps early July, so we have to wait a year, that would mean that'd go for another full year. So we just try to give some clarity to what that is, and how you calculate a term and how long you have to be off before you can either be reappointed or run for election for another and on another occasion. That section also, those provisions in the charter also, there's some, one of the things we haven't availed ourselves of is a constitutional amendment. And as you know, the state constitution right now requires, and prior to this amendment, about 8 years ago, more or less, after our last charter election. Up until that time, every city, if you have a 3-year term, if there's a vacancy on the council, for any reason, you have to call a special election to fill the vacancy, and the person has to take office within 120 days of the date of the vacancy. Lots of cities have had issues with that, because you wind up, well, if someone resigns or dies in office in December, we have to have someone filling that seat in a special election, basically 4 months after the seat is vacant. So if someone passed away or someone resigned in, say, December, by April, we'd have to have somebody appointed to that seat by an election, and then they'd turn around and run for either election or re-election a month later. And so the Constitution was amended to say that if there's a year left on that person's term, the council, you could always call an election if you wish, but the council can appoint someone to fill that vacancy. And so you don't have to call a special election. And the council appoints a person, they serve, they fill the remainder of that term, and then there's an election. Obviously, that person can run. The person who's appointed to fill the vacancy can opt to run or not run for that. But it saves cities the expense of having a special election, sometimes for even a short period of time.
Which is very expensive.
Yeah, that election is on us, because it's a special election that we have to call, and no one else will be having an election on that day. And I'll just tell you, as a practical matter, there are a good number of cities, when they've had a vacancy happen about December or January, they're like, we're not going to spend the money, have a special election, have someone get elected to serve a month or 2 months, and they'll say, we'll just wait till the next election. So this provision lets us avail ourselves of that constitutional amendment and keeps us from perhaps calling a special election. And again, council can always opt to call a special election, but it gives council the option to say, let's appoint someone. And it's only when there's a year or less left on a 3-year term. If there's a year and a half left on a 3-year term, we have to call an election. Then we had one somewhat, I don't want to say goofy, but a provision that was in the charter that and it talked about, and this is section 9.05, where no asphalt or concrete road or street or thoroughfare can be cut without the city manager's written approval. And I mean, Mike suggested, we haven't done that as a practical matter, and everything gets bid. We go through the whole process, and so this is just delete that provision, since it's, I would say, not really necessary. On the next one, section 11.06, this is the nepotism provision, and what we did in here is just simply cited state law, and said, rather than us have special rules on nepotism, we're just going to refer to what the Texas Government Code provide, and honestly, just that governs it. There's a body of case law out there. If we have a question about it, we look at the statute and how courts have determined those provisions of the statute, and it makes it easier for us as well. And we had some, our current provision says that, for example, relative the council members, the manager, department heads can't be employed by the city except in accordance with state law. That's a little vague. So like, rather than get into a discussion, what does that mean? Let's just adopt the state law provision since that is clear, and we should not have as much trouble trying to interpret that as a consequence of that. Section 11.2 is this is nothing more than a clarification. I believe in Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, that we published twice.
Yes.
So when we adopt an ordinance, if we adopt an ordinance that has a penalty, we're required to publish that in the newspaper. And that's just the caption of the ordinance. This provision allows us to only do it once. There's no requirement we do it twice, but it's a cost savings. And honestly, I just say my personal opinion. When's the last time you looked in the newspaper, in a newspaper? When's the last time you read a newspaper? But then when do you look in the fine print in the newspaper, see someone's published an ordinance they've adopted? And so this, I would hope, one of my hopes is that I don't know if this will ever happen because of the Dallas Morning News, Fort Worth Star Telegram, the Austin paper, the Houston paper, is there's a movement afoot every session of the legislature to go to internet and online notice, and that gets defeated by the major newspapers in the state every year because putting it in the one ads, the notice of the one ad section is a big source of revenue now. But anyway, this requires us to do it once, not twice, and publish it. And then the last proposition is a routine one that is included in virtually every bond election. And that is, if there are any other errors or there are other changes, typographical errors, statute change, we'll make those like minutia type changes to the charter. They're non-substantive changes to the charter. So that's an overview of what the Charter Review Commission decided to present to you. Now, again, they make a recommendation. You're not bound by that. If there's any other provision in the charter you all wanted to change, this is the time to do it. I think what we would be looking for tonight is this is okay, or whatever you want to do. Give us direction on that, because we will be calling an election in January, and so we have to prepare a special ordinance for any charter amendments, because that's a special election, not a general election. We'd be making those changes. I mean, in about a month or whatever, we're going to come back to you with an ordinance for the general election and presumably one for the charter election.
And the charter changes have to be spelled out specifically in that ordinance.
The ordinance goes into great detail. The language on the ballot is not, it's more succinct because you can't have half a page definition, but there's guidance and the Secretary of State's office how we do it. So you'll see the ordinance will have what the new provision will look like, whereas the the charter proposition will be a more succinct statement of that. And then a box saying yes or no for approval or approval.
So, questions?
There, I served on that committee, and it was a pretty good sized committee. Everyone worked extremely hard and lots of questions. And our city manager and our attorney there were very helpful. And I think they did a good job.
Bill, you were on there also. What do you think?
Was definitely very interesting. And confusing.
Okay,
To say the least.
Mr. Long, you served on it too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think the members did a very good job. We got a lot of insight from Mike and Terry. And I think the council will be pleased to pass it.
Anybody have any questions about any of these changes? Discussion, comments? One of the things that still sticks with me, Terry, and I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this right. You've got a council member who's at the end of their fourth term.
Mhm.
and it's mayoral election time. Do they have to set out a general election before they can run for mayor?
If they, well, the answer would be yes. If they run for mayor in, they're serving the end of their 4th term, and they announce for mayor, there's a vacancy as of that point in time. And so now, if this passes, that will still count as that'd be 4 consecutive terms.
Right.
And so they would, when they vacate their term, they're still considered being in that term for which they were elected. So if we wanted to allow them to, say someone is in their 4th term, as a council member, and they opt to run for mayor, I prepared some language for what that would look like if we wanted to say, yes, whether it's your 4th term or not, if you want to run for mayor, you have the option to, as soon as you announce for mayor, you resign, but that would allow you to run in that May election. So I'll take, I don't know, Mike, what term is this for you? 3rd? 2nd? Third. So let's assume your term expires in May, and you decided in January you want to run for mayor in the May election. And again, I'm just hypothetical. Then, if you would, when you file in January, your seat is vacant at that point in time. You will be deemed to have served a full term because you're resigning to run with 4 or 5 months left in your term. So to clarify, if you want to run for mayor, I prepared some language that would say, in that situation, you could run for mayor in the May election, and then it would authorize you to do that. Now, then if you did that, you would have 4 terms you could serve as mayor.
That's not really.
What? No. I'm saying what the provision, what the language I provided. You haven't seen it. I provided language that would allow that to occur.
So that's different.
That's different than what you have. Yes, sir.
What we had is what we agreed on.
No. I had some indication that this question might come up, so I prepared some alternate language to address that. You have not seen that. I can pass it out to you if you'd like to see it.
But that was not what was approved by the charter.
But the charter committee,
Right.
what I, as the charter committee thought, was you serve as a council member for 3 terms. And in January of your 3rd term, you decide to run for mayor. So you run in that election and you're mayor. So now your 4th term, you're mayor. And then if you're going, and at that point, you have now 4 consecutive terms and you have to sit out 1 election cycle before you can run again. That was my understanding of what we had decided on. But reading the background information for this ordinance, it implies that that's not the case.
Correct. Because our current ordinance says, and this, we haven't changed it. It says 4 consecutive terms for council member, 4 consecutive terms for mayor.
And or.
Well, but the problem with the current language in our ordinance is that I don't know why that there was that parenthetical that was in the ordinance, and it had the language. Let me take a look at it real quick. It had language, and again, this was done back in the late '90s. So I have no idea what the reason was. The law hasn't changed. It said that no person shall serve for more than 4 consecutive terms of 12 years, whichever is less, as council member and mayor combined. The problem with that language is that at least the problem I see with it is that if you serve 3 years as 3 terms as a council member, and you decide to run, or what would be your 4th term, you run for mayor, you vacate your office, and therefore you can never have those combined because by law that there's a vacancy. So if Mike decides he wants to run for mayor at the end of his 3rd term, then what happens right now is if he announces for mayor, files for mayor, his seat becomes vacant. And so he won't have consecutive terms because there's a vacancy there. So he would serve in essence almost 3 terms, would kind of miss it by 4 or 5 months. And then, so he has not served consecutive terms. If he got elected mayor, he has not served consecutive terms. I think, again, this is my rank speculation back in 1990. I don't know if any of us were here. I think the thought was, I assume the thought was, if you run for mayor or whatever, it's just 4 terms, period. And so in your situation, Mike, if you ran, you'd be considered having served 3 terms, you ran for mayor, and you'd be able to serve 1 term. And I think that's kind of how I assume that's what the thought was.
And
But-
I think that's what y'all thought we were asking for clarification on.
Right, and that's why I clarified it. So we make clear.
No, we did not make it clear, because it is not clear. I am not clear at all.
Well, this is pretty clear right in here, and then we jump into all these other things that we talked about.
So,
All of it has changed.
so I'm reading this background information sheet, and it explains 4.01. And it says, for example, if this item were placed on the next election and approved by the voters, the following would apply. Mayor Kimball would be allowed to serve 3 more terms as mayor. Current council members would have to sit out 1 election cycle after serving their 4th term. I don't
Right.
understand. I thought the way that we had agreed is you serve, if you serve 3, if you are elected council 3 terms, and on your 3rd term in January, you give up your seat because you're going to run for mayor, and you have served 50% or more of your term, so your term is complete. You've served more than 50% of your term, so that's considered that you've served a complete term.
With the language we proposed, that's correct.
With the new,
Yes, that's correct.
with the new language, if you serve 50% or more of your current term, then that's a full term.
That's full term.
So I give up my seat in January, the last January, the 3rd year of my term. So I guess that's, if it was the 1st January, that might make it different, but if it's the 3rd January, the 3rd year.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have 4 months left, but that will be deemed as a full term.
So as long as I have served 50% of that term and I run for mayor, I can and I become mayor, I can serve 1 term as mayor, and then I have to sit out a full election cycle. I served 3 full terms as council and 1 full term as mayor, and now I have to sit out an election cycle. That is what I thought we agreed on.
So one of the things that I would follow up with what she's saying is, for instance, when Scott announced him running for mayor, he finished out his term. He didn't terminate his term when he announced it. He finished out his term until the election happened.
No, well-
and he got out of that seat.
No, but the issue is that when a council member, this is like Scott's perfect example. Scott could have announced it, and he did announce it in January, whenever that was. Constitutionally, you carry over and you perform the duties until your replacement is appointed or elected. So even
It's
though,
not considered.
well, under what we're proposing, that'd be considered, that he was considered a full term in office as a councilman. Because it was it clear, Mayor? Was it the 3rd year? Was it 3rd year of your term?
It was
3rd year of your term. Okay, so that would constitute a full term for him. So now the thing is, our charter currently provides that if someone announces, so when Scott announced for mayor, his council seat was vacant. and he runs for mayor. Now, he gets to carry over until his appointment is elected. So he has to constitutionally fill that seat until, I mean, for example, if we had 4 council members decide to run for mayor and they all resign, we never have quorum. The Constitution provides someone carries over until their successor takes office. They're not elected. They have legally vacated their seat. The election code says at that point in time their seat is vacant, but they can carry on and they continue voting and participating like any council member would,
Like an appointee.
like an appointee would.
So it
And I'm sorry, I was talking about the alternate option too. So I'm sorry if that's confusing.
the,
It is.
the point would be, if we did this and changed to where we can appoint somebody to fulfill that, the rest of that term, as soon as the resignation's in, the next council meeting, you appoint somebody to fill that, then that person who resigned is no longer on the council.
But I still don't think that's really part of the question. I think it's, so if you have a council member that is elected in May, and in that very next January, they decide that they're going to run for mayor and they give up their seat, they have not fulfilled the full term because they've only served a few months. So that is not a full term. So, okay,
That triggers an election, a special election to fill the vacancy. Correct.
Well, right. But as far as if they run for mayor and they get mayor, I'm not talking about their seat that they're leaving.
their
I'm talking
vacant
about
seat.
that individual person.
Right.
If they serve 1 3-year term, 2 3-year terms, their third 3-year term, they serve from May to January and they give up that seat to run for mayor. Okay, that's not a full term. And they're running for mayor and then they start the 3-year term as the mayor. I think that term as mayor is still term 3 because they did not serve the full, they did not serve 50% of that. I think what we were looking for is a gap. If you're here for 4 terms, there has to be a gap of an election.
And
And
what
what is the definition we got?
Election.
Well, and that's what this subpart D is talked about. That's the gap we discussed. That's the gap if you serve 4 consecutive terms on the council, then when your term ends, your fourth term ends, you have to go through another election cycle before you can run again.
Right, but that's why I don't understand why this background summary.
I-
says-
I can answer that.
Oh, I didn't provide the background.
I can answer that. It was, we'll talk about Scott here. As of today, he had vacated his seat, so he's on his first term. Because we don't go backwards when we start from the election moving forward.
He vacated his seat in January.
That's right.
And that was the 3rd year of
Mhm.
term.
Right. So once he vacated, he gave up his seat. He's no longer an elected official. Even though he's up here, he's still no longer elected official.
I agree with that. I believe that because he had served more than 50% of that term, that was considered a full term. He did not have a gap of a
Right.
full election.
Yeah, but regardless of that, because we don't go backwards on the election. So once that election, say we have it made and it gets approved, it starts right then moving forward. We don't go backwards. And because his last term here, he vacated, that ended his term because he was no longer consecutive and it started over. So as of today, he's on his first year term.
That's what our expectation.
Right. But you can't go backwards, but you move forward.
That's what the current charter.
Yes. Yeah. That's right.
That's why we're talking about, do we need to change it and update it to clarify?
Right, and it's saying if this is placed on the next election and if it's approved, then you would be allowed to serve 3 more terms. And I think that that's not what we were.
He would be allowed to serve 3 more terms under our current charter as well.
So that's not what that said. This is,
Right.
if we put this on the ballot and it's approved.
Then it goes in effect in May of 2023. It doesn't affect the past.
Because at the time that we did,
That's right. Because he vacated his seat. Okay.
Now,
Okay.
if we approve this, and then I know.
I don't mean, I don't know, I'm just poking fun at you.
It starts right then, move forward.
Years from now, in that scenario, then it would be a different.
Correct,
But-
absolutely.
So,
It just, I get it.
so let me ask this question because my election is up this next year. I'll have to run again this next year if I choose to stay. I haven't made that decision yet.
It ain't looking good tonight.
So it ain't looking good so far. I'll tell you after tomorrow night. The mayor just took office, so that mayor's seat would not be open. So I would be in a fourth term if I chose to run for mayor.
Right.
I would be 2 years into a term, which would be over 50% of that fourth term. And upon my announcement to run, I would be considered off the council. And that would be defined as ending my,
With the new
More time.
language, with the new language, that year you resigned, if you resigned in January to run for mayor, that's gonna count as a full term.
I think one of the things that is confusing me is what constitutes a year in legal terms in this election cycle
So what we-
can be as little as 3 months or 4 months.
In the word in here, they have it one general election. So when it is, you have to sit out to the next general election, which is normally May.
Well, what I see as a general election is between place 1 and place 4 is a general election.
Correct.
Those
We
two
were-
cycles, that's not from January to May.
Well, what we were talking about was,
It would be from January past May until the next election. Because if I just step off the side,
Well-
this is the election coming. I'm not conceiving how I'm missing a complete
Let me just see,
election cycle.
let me just say, the election cycle language only applies for someone who served 4 consecutive elected terms. That's when that gap period starts. Which means you'd have to serve four full terms. Wait for, you skip a general election and then you can run again and that triggers another.
and if you step down.
Exactly what I'm asking.
Yes.
If I run for election this next year and I get elected, I'm in my 4th term. So I've served 4 terms. I could not run for mayor's office until past
Until the
that
next May.
election.
Yeah. And because we have 3-year terms, you may have to wait, if you want to run for mayor, you may have to wait a couple years just for the simple reason that the mayor's not elected every year.
But you could run for place, whatever.
Yeah.
But if you step down in January and get a third, now y'all understand why I said what I did. It was very confusing.
You're right, it is very confusing because there are attorney general opinions out there that explain the confusion. One is that when someone announces they're running for office for another position, they have vacated their seat as a matter of law. The Constitution then says, but you have to continue serving until your successor is appointed.
Well, but even
And
if you're
so-
not continuing serving, if considering if you serve more than 50% and you fulfilled it, your counter doesn't start until if you had not stepped down until that finishes. So even though you may vacate in January, you're considered having served the full term.
The full term.
So the counter for that's why the election cycle is really not January to January, it's May to May.
That's
right. And we did general election so that if there was a need for a special election, we're still backing up to whatever the May election was.
And add more confusion, the legislature has given some thought to changing May municipal elections only to November. Right now, they're either May or November. And they talked about last time to make all November. All our terms expire in May. So the legislature had to make some changes. So what happens to all those people? The COVID year, 2020 was a great example. The May election was canceled by the governor. And so everybody who was elected, whose term was up in May, got to wait till November before they left office, but they were considered elected in May, even though they couldn't take office till after the November election. So now that was, we pray we don't have another thing like that.
Oh.
But the governor had to enact all kinds of specific orders to clarify, well, what happens to all those people? So, you know, when you punt the election 6 more months.
Yes, I'm.
Yeah, I'm gonna say it up here.
We're not voting on this.
I think we need to, because if we're going to do this, we have to bring the
Yeah.
ordinance
In January.
in January to have it.
And we will go change by change to the vote.
I think that's reasonable.
The only problem I got is I think we're clarifying that, and you know, what kind of misleading. You know, that it used to be the and or mayor, or I'm not picking on anybody.
Yeah.
But you, because I was told several times, along with other people, that we couldn't run ever, not in our lifetime.
And that was
Yeah.
one of the things.
Yes.
And it was clarified that further up into the charter, it does clarify that mayor or city council is one and the same whenever it comes to terms. And that is, we did find that was clarified in the charter. So it's just council.
Yeah, had it been the way it was, I could have served 2 more terms as mayor because I started over from a council member to a mayor.
Well, but, Murray, let me say, Murray,
I mean,
I think you're right. I don't know. I can't tell you who, I don't know who gave you that opinion.
well, I can name a few.
Well, no, you don't have to, but the problem was, I think
Let's not have it crossed out.
one individual I knew of told people that too, that it was like this cumulative
Right.
4, and you get 2 as council, 2 as mayor, and it's like,
Well, it was either or.
and the language for the charter was, I'm not arguing, that's what the charter said. The problem with it is that there was no way, practically speaking, that could ever happen. Because if you serve 2 terms and then when you announce for mayor, you resign, you created a vacancy. And the trigger in our charter is 4 consecutive terms. If you have a vacancy, it's not a consecutive term. Now, this clarifies it, and that's it. This would now say that would be a full term. I mean, if someone really want to game the system and say, I don't ever want to leave office and the voters will always vote for me, no matter how long I live, I don't think that'll ever happen. But under our old charter, you could serve 4 terms and right before the expiration of your 4th term, you announce for another position on the council, create a vacancy, you get 4 more terms right before the end of those that 4th term.
So that's where I was getting.
And that's where you can have this continual leapfrogging and go, I'm in full compliance with the charter. And you know, I served 36 years. You know, whatever.
So that's what I was getting wrapped around the wheel about. And the reason that it says that is because Scott was elected mayor with the current
System.
wording. And because he was elected with that wording, that is why for his specific example only,
Right.
he will be able to. But now we are going to make a change in the future. If we get to 12 years from now, and that scenario had happened.
Right, no, I understand that part.
That's where I was getting confused, because it was saying in this example, and I was like, well, that's what we were trying
Trying to address.
avoid,
Yes.
and we would in the future, but because he was elected and for some otherwise.
No, I understood that. Right. It's, yeah. No, I
I
think.
think that it was very.
But still, like me in here, is there any simpler language we can put in there like? You know, it's still vague to me as to how this comes together. I mean, so Scott serves 3 more terms as mayor, okay?
Right.
But then at the end of that 3 years, or this 4th year.
4th
he
term.
said, yes, 4th term, he said, I'm gonna step down as mayor, but I'm gonna run for council.
You cannot.
do that.
He will have be deemed to have served 4 consecutive terms, so he got to wait an election cycle.
Yeah.
That's why we added that language, so I don't think anyone was ever gamed the system, but just with the way our charter was written, and the mayor and I had this discussion a year ago too, and it's like, the way it's written, he vacates his council seat and runs for mayor. And so it's not a consecutive term. You don't have consecutive terms. There's a vacancy there. And we're trying to, this clarifies that now to say,
Doesn't the same thing apply if he runs, like Will said, 4 consecutive terms as mayor?
It doesn't matter,
It
it
doesn't
doesn't matter
matter.
what position,
It doesn't matter
it's
what
all the
position.
same. Whenever it comes to the terms, all positions are equal, it's council.
So at the end of his 4th term, he can resign and run for council.
No.
No, sir.
no, he has to set an election cycle.
He does it as a year.
A gap year, kind of, so to speak.
Currently, he can do that, what you're saying.
Yes.
If this changes, he can't.
And that's why the confusing part was clarifying, because he was elected where the verbiage allowed it. And so if we change it, his timer starts over because of that vacancy.
I guess that's where I'm truly lost, is because
Not- it's not
that we've always were under the impression that year had to be set out.
But that's why we're trying to clarify it in.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, currently, there's nothing in the charter that says you have to wait out a year.
yeah. there's
It just
that
says you
out
4 consecutive. So once that one day you're not in office, it starts all over.
And that's what we're correcting.
there. That's what it's for.
Okay.
And it is state law that when you declare for an elected,
Our
elected
our
position.
charter requires it.
Okay, yeah,
Our
it's-
charter requires it.
yeah, it's required by the charter, it's not required by state law.
By most positions, yeah, the Texas Constitution and the resign to run provision.
I trust our election official.
I just wanted to make sure that what we have documented is very clear, so that if any member of our community comes down and questions the decision, she is easily able to explain why a decision was made. Or the other. I don't want to put her in a position of having to interpret to the best of her ability. I would like for it to be clear. And it was until I read that and I got confused.
I can also have to go to college.
Here's what, guys,
It's by definition, it's because of state law, it's not perfectly clear. I mean, I think when they adopted the charter in 1998, I think the idea was there's a combination of terms. You get 4 terms. You can do 2 as mayor and 2 as council member, 3 and 1, whatever. The only problem was that didn't take into account what state law actually said. I mean, conceptually, I understand that you get 4 terms in a row, however you want to fill it. It's just that it didn't specifically say that in the charter. The charter wasn't precise enough, which led to, I'm sorry, like with Merle, someone said, no, you can't run again. It's like, wasn't technically correct. I mean, we know that was long ago. Okay, yeah, and I would not have given you that legal opinion. So, the charter.
I don't disagree with everything being said. I just want to understand it.
Yeah.
I was understanding just a few seconds ago, how it's actually going to read and state,
Yeah.
So now you can serve in any capacity up to 4 years, and then you got to get off the year.
4 terms.
4 terms.
4 3-year terms.
Yes.
Thanks.
But I do agree, we should do. Listen,
So does anybody have any other recommendations for any other part of the department that you look over to that might want us to consider this evening? Is what the review committee came up with, is what we're gonna look at. Okay, so the first change that we see then would be in the section B forfeiture of office. We have the changes highlighted, marked. If a office, the post office of a member fails to attend 3 consecutive regular meetings of the city council without being excused by the city council. The city council shall be the final judge of matters involving forfeiture of office by a council member or the mayor. Okay, so we're gonna vote on each of these.
Does that mean that the city council has to have a concession to agree to excuse, or the mayor can excuse solely?
The full council has to make the decision whether it's excused or not. It will not be the purview of the mayor or anyone individual.
Or it won't be automatic,
Or
or it won't be, and also will not be automatic.
Not be automatic.
Not be automatic.
Okay.
Yes.
so on the change to B3, do I have a motion?
I make a motion, we approve. No, I make a motion, what do we do,
I would say we're going to approve to approve the recommendation of the Charter Review Commission relative to section 3.06 of the charter.
Okay.
And that would just be as is. We're gonna go back and double check all the wording, but okay.
That's what I'm saying.
That's your motion. We're going to, if there's any discussion on each one of these. Okay, so, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, so I have a motion by Shelley to amend the charter section 3.06 as marked. Good enough?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, as marked, and a second by Mike Kidd. Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? 6-0, or excuse me, 7, unanimous. Okay, moving on to section 4.01. Council terms and limits. Do we have a motion?
I'll make
a motion to approve, the quotation. As marked.
Right, have a motion by Angela to approve this changes to section 4.01 of the charter as marked, seconded by Johnny. Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Yeah,
They raised our hands also.
okay, 1, 2. Hang on a second. 4.01, yeah. Okay, yeah, all those in favor? Okay. 6-0, one abstention. Okay, section 4.10 vacancies. Have a motion to approve that.
I make a motion, we approve section C, having that for section 4.1 rooted.
Okay, okay, Shelley moved that we approve section 4.10 vacancies as amended or recommended by the committee. Angela seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Take section 9.5. Right of regulation. There was no change there.
The asphalt concrete street.
H.
Yeah. 9.05, yeah. So the recommendation is for no change?
No,
No.
the recommendation is that we strike the.
Okay, so that's currently in there?
Right,
Oh,
currently, yeah.
to strike.
We'll just strike it.
I'd like to move that we accept, changes. Yeah, chamber on 9.05 and H.
I'm sorry.
To take that out, okay? We're gonna move to amend section 9.05, item H, as noted. Seconded by Shelley, any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Section 11.06, nepotism. Make a motion we approve, thing, section 11.06. That adds marked. Okay. Have a motion by Robert to approve the change, or to make changes to section 11.06 on nepotism as marked. Seconded by Merle. Any discussion? All those in favor? 7-0. Unanimous. Section 11.12 official medium. Changing it to once instead of twice.
I'll make a motion to approve. Section 11.12.
Okay, motion by Mike to approve the change to section 11.12 official medium to warrants, seconded by Merle. Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, and item 7, general bond proposition.
Move to approve general bond proposition as written and recommended by the committee.
So we have a motion by Johnny on the general bond proposition to amend as recommended by the committee, seconded by Shelley. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Okay, so next month we will have the ordinance,
The election ordinance.
the election ordinance for the charter updates. Okay, thanks to everyone who worked so hard on this. This has been a difficult, long, back and forth, up and down, in and out. I think I actually heard in Terry's voice one time, he was ready to walk away. So it was contentious and very involved, and I appreciate everybody's hard work on it. One of the things that we need to continue to do is to keep our citizens involved with how we do things. And the Charter Review Committee was a good point that we need to do this on a regular basis. Not every 5 years, is that?
We're not, the charter, there's no requirement of every 5 years or something in state law changes we can't do it more than every 2 years by constitution. And one thing, Mayor and Council, I thought what I would provide is, assuming we pass the ordinance for to call the election, is do a explanatory memo, and like basically saying why this was considered by the commission. We can't advocate one way or the other, but to explain what happened. And I've had cities in the past that put that on their website. So if someone wants to look and see what does this mean by asphalt streets, I mean, why are we taking that out? And it's just more of an explanation of why we're doing it. And here's the old language, here's the new language.
Okay. Is that something we need to have the city secretary do, or is that something you could do for us?
I think I'd probably do it, trying to explain it, and I mean, obviously Mike and Allison see it before, it goes out and get any comments from them.
I think if we really wanted to use them, we could also put them to the recording of this.
Okay, so moving on to staff reports for the month. Does anybody have any question on any of the staff reports? Or yeah. Okay. No questions on any of those reports? Okay, does anybody have any requests for future agenda items? Or any requests from anybody? All right. Wait, I guess I can't ask. That's not important.
I was just asking her, last month, Mr. Kidd asked for a tree ordinance to come back with a list of the specified trees, both, I guess, good and bad. And we're still working on that.
I can answer that, or, yeah, we had to take it to P and Z. They reviewed it very well. In fact, they're continuing it to the next meeting because they're making several recommendations on it.
Still on.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, in that case, 8:09, we're adjourned.